Okay, today we've got the Garmin Venu 3 and the Garmin Vivoactive 5 because on paper these two watches are basically the same watch. So I felt compelled to make a video on this and why these two are different and why one of these probably shouldn't exist. If you're wondering what is the Garmin Vivoactive series, I haven't heard of that before. Well, it's kind of a relic of the past. The Vivoactive line was updated yearly up until about 4 years ago when Garmin kind of dropped it in favor of the new Garmin Venu series, because the Venu series in a lot of ways was the same as the Vivo series, except it had a really nice display. This time around, however, Garmin has updated the Vivoactive series with the version 5 here, and now both of these watches have a really nice display. So why do they exist and how are they different? That's what we're going to talk about today. This video is designed to identify the differences between these two watches, and because of that, I'm not going to dive too deep on any specific feature. I'm not going to dive through every menu item and every little difference between these two watches. Largely, the Garmin Venu series and the Vivoactive series were designed for general wellness, for everyday users, casual users, to improve their daily habits with sleep and recovery, and occasionally track their workouts with runs and going to the gym and cycling and things like that. Before we dive into the differences, let's quickly dive through what's the same. Well, both these watches have the same user interface with Garmin's redesigned menu system, which adds a really handy app section alongside the activity section. These watches have a really nicely designed UI. It's all very colorful. There's a lot of animations and things like that. We're not going to dive too deep, but just know it's largely the same between these two. And like I said before, both of these watches have excellent AMOLED touch-enabled displays. They both have really good responsiveness. There's really no lag in response when you touch them. There's no lag or anything like that. So they're good in that department as well. And on top of that, they both have a very similar feature set, including that new sleep tracking feature with factors that affect your sleep, and it kind of spells it all out for you. Both of these watches have the new Garmin nap detection, which is really cool. And along with that, there's the updated body battery widget, which also shows the factors that affect your body battery. When it comes to wellness features, the only difference between the Venu 3 and the Vivoactive 5 is going to be that the Venu 3 gets that jet lag advisor, which was introduced in one of the really high-end Garmins of the past. It's now here on the Venu 3 as well. I'm not going to speak too much about it because I haven't traveled to test it out. Just know it's there. And when it comes to smartwatch features, these two are largely the same there as well. Both have onboard music and internal storage, so you can download music from Spotify or Amazon. Both get Garmin Pay for contactless payments, and both will show your phone notifications and calendar events and all that stuff, along with access to Garmin's Connect IQ store. After running through all those similarities, you're probably sitting there wondering, why are there two different models if these two are so similar? And I have to wonder that myself. I feel like both of these could have been lumped into the Venu family. This could have been like a Venu Lite or something like that, but that's not what Garmin did here. So let's talk about the differences. The first major difference between the Garmin Venu 3 and the Vivoactive 5 is going to be the size options. So the Garmin Venu 3 comes in two sizes. You can get it in the 41mm form factor, which is smaller, or you can get the 45mm form factor, which I have here, which is the larger version. These are the exact same watches, whether or not you get the big or the small one. The only difference will be the physical size, the display size, because one's bigger and one's smaller, and the battery life, because again, you can put a bigger battery in a bigger case. Moving over to the Vivoactive 5, it's a bit different. There is only one version of this watch, and it's 42mm in diameter. You can buy different colors that are available for the Vivoactive 5, but there is only one size available. So at this point of the video, if you're somebody who does not like small watches, stop the video here and go buy the Venu 3 45mm version, because you can't get a bigger version of the Vivoactive 5 yet, maybe in the future, but it's not here right now. Now, if you don't care about the physical size of your watch, let's move into the next topic, and that will be build quality. The difference in build quality here is minor and kind of silly. So if I flip both of these watches over, on the right, we've got the Venu 3, on the left is the Vivoactive 5. You can see that they're mainly made out of plastic. The entire back side of the watch, the majority of the watch is made out of plastic or fiber, polymer, whatever fancy word they use for it. It's plastic. However, the Garmin Venu 3 does have a couple advantages. First of all, the buttons on the Garmin Venu 3 are made of stainless steel. You can see there, they're just a raw stainless steel. It does look kind of nice, but on top of that, it also feels kind of nice. And the bezel on the Garmin Venu 3 is also made out of stainless steel. And on top of that, you also get this kind of texture around the perimeter there. On the Garmin Vivoactive 5 here, it does have an aluminum bezel, so it's not all plastic, and it does get some protection on the front here with that aluminum bezel, but but there is no texture on this bezel, it's all smooth. Now the rest of the watch I'm pretty sure is made out of plastic, and that does include the buttons as well. Like I said, the difference here is pretty minor. The Venu 3 does get some more premium materials, but I think both would hold up to the same abuse the same way. Hey there, quick interruption. If you're finding this video fun or helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you went down and gave me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel down below so you don't miss more videos like this in the future. Also, if you're planning on picking up the Vivoactive 5 or the Venu 3, check out the links in the description down below that head over to playbetter.com where you can pick up these watches and get free 2-day shipping and a no-hassle return policy, and they're just a great place to shop. So check them out. Okay, back to the video. Moving into the next topic, and that's going to be internal storage, and this is going to be pretty simple. On the more expensive Garmin Venu 3, you get 8 gigabytes of internal storage, where on the less expensive Vivoactive 5, you get 4 gigabytes of internal storage. That storage is used for things like your offline music, your podcasts, and the apps that you download from the Connect IQ store. The Venu 3 does get double the capacity when it comes to the internal storage, but it's important to remember that 4 gigabytes is probably enough for most people, unless you're a power user and you're downloading an entire music or podcast library to your watch. Now let's talk about sensors between the Vivoactive 5 and Venu 3. These two watches are very similar when it comes to the internal sensors of the watch. So you've got a compass, an accelerometer, and an ambient light sensor on both of these watches, along with the obvious GPS and heart rate sensor, which we'll talk about later in this video. The only difference when it comes to sensors is going to be that the more expensive Venu 3 gets a barometric altimeter along with a gyroscope internal to the watch. Now, when it comes to the benefit of having a built-in barometric altimeter, it's a minor difference, but it is there. If you're out on a trail run or a hike, or you're going for a walk and you want to look at your watch and see how far above sea level you are and actually see the current elevation of your watch, you can do that with the Garmin Venu 3, while you can't do that with the Vivoactive 5. It's important to remember that after your activity, when it's synced over to Garmin Connect, the Vivoactive 5 will still get that elevation data embedded into its GPX file. It's just not there when you're out on the activity. Another benefit to having that built-in altimeter is that on the Garmin Venu 3, it unlocks one more health metric, and that's floors climbed. So the watch will actually record how many flights of stairs you climb throughout the day, and that's just a metric you can keep to see how active you were on a given day, along with your step count and things like that, which both watches do get. Moving into the next physical difference between these two watches, and that's going to be with the buttons. Like I said before, both have buttons, however, both do not rely on the buttons for all of their actions. So if you're used to something like the Garmin Forerunner 965 or 255 or any Forerunner model for that matter, you usually get this 5-button layout where you can control everything on the watch just from the button. So if you have wet, sweaty hands or you have gloves on, you don't need to touch the screen at all. You can do everything from the buttons. Now on the Venu series and Vivoactive series, it's a bit different because Garmin expects you to interact with the watch using the screens, but there are some buttons to do some of the actions. The way this works on both watches is you've got an upper button here, which you can click to dive into your activity or app menu. So from here, I can click on apps or activities to do a variety of things, but I can also hold that button and that'll dive me into a quick controls menu to do things like do not disturb or sleep mode or lock my screen, things like that. Both watches also have a dedicated back button below that, where if you're in any menu, you can simply click that back button to go back from your watch face, and you don't have to use that button. You can also just swipe to the left to do the same thing. The back button is dual purpose though, where you can hold it and dive directly into your settings to change your watch face or go deeper into your settings as well. And like I said before, both of these watches do have that upper and lower button, but the Garmin Venu 3 also adds a third button in the middle here, which has a couple of functions. First of all, you can simply click it once, and that will dive you directly into your recently used apps. So you can see, I just recently used my intensity minutes or my music, but you can also long press this and dive into your voice assistant. And that's where things change quite a bit between the Garmin Venu 3, the Vivoactive 5, and how they connect with your phone. Because like I said, the Garmin Venu 3 has a voice assistant function, which you can summon when you're out and about without digging out your phone from your pocket. What's the weather right now?
It's currently clear and 82 degrees. Temperatures are heading down from 83 to 64 degrees tonight.
I'm mainly an iPhone user and use Siri on my iPhone, and it's been working great through the Venu 3 as well. And what's really interesting about this is a lot of watches try to have Siri compatibility, but they don't do it well. With the Venu 3, it works with just about every Siri call I can come up with. And when you press and hold this button, you do get this really cool animation, and you can see that Siri's already launched and it's already summoned on my phone, and it's now recording and transcribing everything I'm saying right now. But the speaker and microphone are not just used for the voice assistant. You can also dive into your app menu here, jump over to apps, go to phone, and now you can actually make phone calls right from the watch on your wrist instead of having to get your phone out of your pocket, which is also very handy when you're out on a run or doing something like a workout at a gym. There's a couple of options when it comes to taking and making phone calls on the Garmin Venu 3. As you can see here within the phone app on the right, I've got an option for my contact menu, so I can dive through a list of contacts I want to call quickly, or I can just manually dial a phone number using this dial pad here. I will say that the speaker on the Venu 3, it's not super loud, but that's to be expected from a watch of this size. It's loud enough where in a moderately noisy environment with my 4 kids around, I can still take a phone call. But if you're like in public on a train or something like that, it may be hard to hear the person on the other end. When it comes to taking and making phone calls and using Siri on the Garmin Venu 3, it's also important to remember that this is not a cellular device and you'll need to have your phone on you for all of these features to work. Moving right along into the next difference between the Vivoactive 5 and the Venu 3, and that's going to be activity profiles. And again, this one's going to be pretty minor for most people. Both of these watches have a lot of the same activity profiles on board. They've got the basics like running, walking, riding a bike, things like that, but they do have more niche activities like meditation and disc golf if you dive further down the menu here. The Garmin Venu 3, however, because of that built-in altimeter, unlocks bouldering, indoor climbing, and hiking thanks to that extra sensor, which the Garmin Vivoactive 5 does not get. With that minor difference out of the way, both the Vivoactive 5 and Venu 3 do have the added wheelchair sports options. On the topic of activity profiles, I do want to share one minor annoyance I have with these watches, and it's that they don't have the same activity profiles as something like the Forerunner series with things like multi-sport mode or triathlon mode or even trail running. Neither of these watches gets trail running, and I don't really get that. I feel like it's kind of the same as hiking on the Venu 3, just add another one in there. I guess I can make my own, but it'd be cool to have it out of the box. Moving into the next topic, and that's going to be external sensor support. Both the Vivoactive 5 and Venu 3 support ANT+ and Bluetooth sensors, so they can both pair to something like an external heart rate sensor like I have here to get more accurate heart rate data. However, there is a minor difference here where if you are a cyclist, the Garmin Venu 3 can collect cycling power from a cycling power accessory, while the Vivoactive 5 cannot. Now let's jump into battery life, because this is always a can of worms, especially in comparison videos. Largely, the Garmin Vivoactive 5 and Venu 3 have similar battery life if you select similar size options. So the smaller Garmin Venu 3S has similar battery life to the Garmin Vivoactive 5. And that's to say both will get you between 10 and 11 days as a standard smartwatch on a single charge, or about 5 days if you've got the always-on display turned on. And the same goes for GPS on battery life when you're actually out on a run or a ride, where if you select the smaller Venu 3S or the Vivoactive 5, you'll get similar numbers there as well. However, because there are 2 size options for the Venu 3, the larger 45mm version does get significantly longer battery life, where in GPS only mode you can get about 26 hours on a single charge, and in smartwatch mode you can get up to about 14 days or 2 weeks on a single charge. Now that we've talked about battery life and GPS modes with these watches, let's talk about GPS accuracy, because that just makes sense here. So both of these watches have the same GPS chipset, and that is an all systems GNSS chipset. Now keep in mind, this GPS chipset is different than what we've seen on previous models like the Garmin Forerunner 965, the 265, the Epix, the Phoenix. Those all got multi-band GPS chipsets, which are kind of the gold standard when it comes to accuracy, while these models, even though this one's pretty expensive, did not. So what does that mean for you, the end user, in terms of accuracy? Well, it turns out not much. I've done a bunch of testing with the Vivoactive 5 and the Venu 3 compared to other watches I have, like the Apple Watch Ultra, the Forerunner 965, the Epix Pro, and in most cases, these watches perform very similarly to those other models. And that's mainly because that multi-band enabled chipset is only really useful in very challenging conditions, where if you're in a slot canyon, or next to a big cliff face, or in a big city with skyscrapers, in those situations you might see a slight advantage with something like the Forerunner 965 or Epix with multi-band mode turned on, but for just about every other situation, these watches will perform really well. With GPS accuracy out of the way, let's flip these watches over and talk about the optical heart rate rate sensors on both of these watches because there is a difference here. So in the Garmin Vivoactive 5, we get the previous generation optical heart rate sensor, which does have an SpO2 sensor built in for blood oxygen saturation. With that said, this is the last generation of this heart rate sensor, which I had pretty good test results with on a lot of watches that I tested with this sensor, but Garmin did come out with a new heart rate sensor, and that's what we're getting on the Garmin Venu 3 here. So as you can see here, if I compare the Venu 3 to my Garmin Epix Pro on the right, this is a $1,000 watch compared to the Venu 3, and they both have the same optical heart rate sensor. The main difference between these heart rate sensors is that on the Garmin Venu 3 with the updated heart rate sensor, it has more LED light emitters compared to the Vivoactive 5, and those are the little white dots you see on the back of the watch there. And because of those additional light emitters, it should yield better accuracy when used in a variety of conditions. Now, I have done testing with both these watches as compared to other watches, along with an ECG chest sensor that I went out on a bunch of runs with, and in most cases, they're both doing pretty good. I will say that the newer heart rate sensor probably has an advantage in some areas, like if you're a hardcore mountain biker or you're somebody doing boxing or jujitsu or somewhere where there's a lot of like wrist flexing and movement and things like that, you might see a benefit with the Venu 3's heart rate sensor compared to the Vivoactive 5's. But I think for most steady state workouts, when you're on a bike, you're on a run, and you're just kind of cruising, both of these have performed pretty well in my testing so far. That's all to say, take my test results with a grain of salt because I mainly run. I'm one person. I have this color skin. I have this body fat percentage, and these things have a lot of variables, so your mileage may vary. And now we've got the big one. Let's talk about the final difference between these two watches, and that's going to be the price. The Garmin Venu 3 is substantially more money than the Vivoactive 5. This watch comes in at $449 here in the USA, while the Vivoactive 5 comes in at $299. So that's a $150 price difference. When it comes to is it worth that $150 to get the Venu 3 over the Vivoactive 5, that's really up to you to decide. I can't really make that decision for you. The factors that will or will not make it worth it for you will be, will you use the built-in speaker and microphone? Do you want the voice assistant on your watch? Do you want the altimeter? Do you want the slightly better build quality and the new heart rate sensor? If you do, then pay the extra $150. But I do think the better value here is definitely the Vivoactive 5. It's like 90% of what the Venu 3 is at $150 less. Honestly though, these are both great options for daily smartwatches to track your wellness and daily activities, and I really like the new sleep coach and body battery features that include the factors that play a role in what's wearing you down or recharging you. That's really cool. However, when it does come to being a dedicated running or sport watch, I do think there's better options out there. These are kind of odd ducklings in that department because for the same $449 you're paying for the Venu 3, you could get the Garmin Forerunner 265, which offers a lot more in that sports and fitness department. And honestly, that's where I get a little bit frustrated with the Garmin lineup as a whole, because at the time of filming this video, you sort of have to make a choice between wellness features or sport features. Currently, the Venu 3 and Vivoactive 5 are the only Garmin watches that feature that updated sleep tracking and body battery feature, along with Sleep Coach. No other watches have that yet. However, these two watches do not support all of those great training tools from Garmin, like training readiness and training load and the race predictor and race calendar and all that stuff. On the other hand, those more training-centric options like the 265 or Forerunner 965 I have here have all of those great advanced features for training, but they don't have the really cool sleep and body battery and sleep coach features on the Venu 3 or Vivoactive 5. I'm sure it's just a matter of time for them to develop the firmware and roll it out to these other models, but at the time of filming this video, it's frustrating because if you want everything, like the best sleep tracking and wellness, and you also want the training tools and everything there, there's no watch that can kind of do it all. And that's where I'm left wondering, why can't Garmin just have the same software on every watch if the hardware can support it? And then it would just be up to you to decide what kind of hardware do you want to buy. It's all very isolated, and I don't know why, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, the Garmin Vivoactive 5 and Venu 3 are great options for the right audience. If you're someone just looking for an everyday tracker to track your step count, your floors climbed, your activity throughout the day, and get a really good insight on your sleep and recovery, these are great tools for the job. For everybody else, the more hardcore runners and cyclists out there, check out something like the Garmin Forerunner 965 or the 265. Those might be better options for you. And now's the point of the video where I want to hear from you. Are you going to get one of these watches? Let me know in the comments down below what features sold you on them, what feature didn't, or if you're just going to get something entirely different. I'd love to hear from you. comment down below. And with that, we have reached the end of the video, and this is the end of my quick comparison, or not so quick comparison, between the Garmin Vivoactive 5 and Venu 3. I hope you enjoyed it, you found it helpful, and if you did, please consider going down and giving me a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel down below so you don't miss more videos from me in the future. While you're down there, check out the links in the description where you can buy one of these watches because those do help support this channel. Check out my podcast down there and check out my Instagram. Follow me over there as well. Do all the things in the description down below. I'd really appreciate that. And with that, I gotta go now. I'll see you next time. Bye.